as well. We are very excited today to be joined by Blue Star Families. And to let you all know, they were founded by military spouses in 2009 to empower military families to thrive as they serve. They're committed to strengthening military families by connecting them with their neighbors, individuals, and organizations to create vibrant communities of mutual support. So a lot of that sounds really familiar to the work that we do. Let me introduce Jessica and Jen and then turn it over to them and get this rolling. Jessica Strong joined Blue Star Families as a volunteer chapter director in 2017, then as a consultant shortly thereafter, and she joined Blue Star Family staff as an applied research analyst in 2019. Her work with applied research focuses on the annual Military Family Lifestyle Survey, as well as developing, executing, and analyzing other research projects that support Blue Star Family's mission and enhance the national conversation around military families. Jen Hurwitz, as a military spouse for the past 20 years, Jen has volunteered and worked in a variety of roles that help to support military families. In 2014, Jen joined Blue Star Families as a volunteer and then progressed from survey contractor to her current position. In her role as the applied research manager, Jen facilitates survey instrument design, leads a team of research analysts, and provides oversight for key military family lifestyle survey materials. Additionally, Jen manages other external and internal research projects that contribute to the mission of Blue Star. Obviously, all of us at CVN, we're well aware that it's Military Family Month next month, and we're very excited, the month of the military child. We're very excited to gain some key insights and analysis in today's conversation. And of course, we urge all of you to ask questions either during breaks that Jessica threw out there or via the chat function within the webinar. So without any further ado, Jessica, I'll turn it over to you to start. You've got control of the PowerPoint.
Control of the PowerPoint. Thank you, Anthony. That was very well read.
All right.
The introduction and the turning over of control. As Anthony mentioned, I'm happy to be with you guys today. I'm with Blue Star Families. I actually am really excited to be presenting with Cohen Veterans Clinic Network today because I saw you guys open up in a couple of different places. I am in Clarksville, Tennessee now, near Fort Campbell, but I was previously in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So I know that you had a clinic open up there. We were actually there twice. And so I was there when y'all opened up the clinic there. And then we moved to Clarksville last year. So I was here for the opening of the Clarksville clinic too. In addition to working with Blue Star Families, I'm a researcher and a social worker. So I also do some part-time work with Youth Villages, which is a organization that does mental health for youth. So I do crisis assessments for youth who have an acute mental health crisis, suicide, and I have actually referred some families in crisis to the Cohen Military Clinic in Centerstone here in Clarksville. And
very nice, Jessica. Jump in for 1 second. There may be a colleague or two of ours around the country. Folks, we hear your work on the keyboard there, so please, everyone else, go on mute both your phone and your computer audio because we hear some other stuff in the background. Sorry, Jessica. I just wanted to
Thank you for
clean that up.
I was also going to say there was a suicide intervention training at the Clarksville Clinic, so I've attended that one, and I appreciate the work that you all do for military families and veteran families. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen for a couple comments and then take it back. Jen, you have control.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so happy to be here, and we look forward to a continued partnership and interaction with Cohen Veterans Network. I am currently in the Louisville area, and we just recently transitioned or retired from the Air Force. My husband was in the Air Force for 20 years, and so now we are officially a veteran family. So I will be here mainly as a support for Jessica, and then I'll also be monitoring the chat. Thank you.
Okay, so as Anthony mentioned, feel free to ask questions or comment throughout. Somebody will either pick it up in the chat or you can unmute and ask a question as well. So let's get to it. So first, what is Blue Star Families? So Blue Star Families is an organization that connects military families with community neighbors to ease the challenges of military life. And to provide a simple way for all Americans to help keep our military families, our military strong. So as Anthony mentioned, we were founded by military spouses in 2009. And since then, we focus on telling the story of what military families face and try to build innovative community-based solutions to connect military families to support. And these are some of our locations. To do this,
close it, please. And can you put the in-session thing? Sure. Thank you.
We do this by building community around military families in a way that is easy and fun and addresses the real-time needs that we find. And we reach about 1.5 million military family members every year. And we're on the ground, we're both on the ground and online. We're on the ground with military families across the country and actually across the world, both in person and online. And you'll see these stars are where we have some programs based. The areas with a funded chapter symbol, those are the red and blue stars. That's where our chapters where we have a permanent local presence. The smaller blue stars are our neighborhoods, and that's where we have some volunteers that we've been able to activate for a variety of different programs. Programs like these. So I won't go into a lot of detail about all of them, but the idea is that people can thrive when they're connected to communities and they're connected to the neighbors that are around them. And we think Blue Star Families believes we can do something to foster that sense of community and strengthen military families through these types of solutions that we have. So we have connected communities, which are those blue and red stars you just saw. We have Blue Star Careers, focusing on spouse employment, which we've noted for years is a concern for military families. Blue Star Books, which is increasing connection through reading and providing books for military kids. Blue Star Museums, Blue Star Parks, these provide admissions for military families to museums and parks to give them a chance to explore their communities and connect. And Blue Star Neighbors, which recognizes civilian community members who are neighbors who support military families. So the one I really want to focus on, though, of course, is that annual Military Family Lifestyle Survey. And so our Military Family Lifestyle Survey, we've been conducting since 2009. And in 2014, we began collaborating with Syracuse University Institute for Veterans and Military Families. And through this survey, we share an annual snapshot of military families, what military family lifestyle is like, with influencers, people who can drive change, and providers like yourselves who can lessen the challenges that military and veteran families are facing. I come from a social work background, and in social work we have this saying that start where the client is, and that's ideally what this survey is working to do, is identify where those clients, where the military families are, what are the issues, so we can start there. Now, if you have been working in this space for a little while, you may have heard that there are several surveys of military members and military families and veterans. Blue Star Families Annual Lifestyle Survey is the largest and the most comprehensive annual survey of service members, veterans, and their families. So we capture all of those different populations. And that positions these results to be one of the few surveys that look at these issues and how they transcend over time. We also have a really nice response rate. In 2009, we started with like 2,000 responses. In 2018, last year, we had over 10,000 service members, veterans, and families who took the time to fill our survey out. So that, I think, is really interesting. Also, as you have met, Jen and I both, our team of lead analysts we're both professional researchers by training, and we're also military and veteran spouses. So we not only study these issues, but we live them as well. So if you want to find out more about the Military Family Lifestyle Survey, beyond what we're going to talk about today, we do have reports available on our website. So you can go to bluestarfam.org and you can find our survey results there. So what are the issues? Because our organization primarily addresses issues of concern to active duty families, that's where we're going to start focusing. As you this may not come as a surprise, but one of the top issues.
I thought I hit the wrong. Thing. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. One of the top issues concerned, they center on the idea of quality of life. Time away from family, balancing military life and spouse employment, and the impact of military life on children. So you can see here the amount of time away from family. 51% said that was a top issue of concern. That's a big issue. This is for the second year in a row. It was the top ranked issue of concern among active duty service members and their spouses. We actually saw an uptick of the percentage of people who noted that too. Last year it was 46% of military families. This year it was 51% of military families. Now, as you may be aware, time away doesn't include just deployments, although people often think of deployments when we talk about time away from family. It also includes overnight training exercises, whether those are local or not, professional development courses, leaving for training in professional development, other work travel, or those long and unpredictable work days. 41% of military family respondents last year said that they had more than 6 months of family separation in the last 18 months. That's a lot of time away from family, and it's a lot of time away from family recently. Over half, 69% of our military family respondents also indicated that the current operational tempo, and which contributes to the amount of time away from family, exerts an unacceptable level of stress for a healthy work-life balance. So not only is it being away from family, but it's causing stress and impeding that healthy work-life balance. So those were the top issues. We also asked families about what their stressors were. And these are the sources of stress that were reported by active duty military families. You'll notice financial issues, financial stress is the top one. And this is the first time it's ever been the top issue of concern. I mean, it's above deployments, it's above relocation stress and separation. And if you had noticed the news, relocation has been really stressful for families recently too. So financial issues is the most common stressor. Actually, pay and benefits has declined as an issue over the years. But when you compare military families to their civilian counterparts, military family respondents reported higher rates of difficulty making ends meet than their civilian counterparts. 13% of military family respondents said they have a difficult time making ends meet. Only 7% of civilian families said the same. I also want to note that we asked about this in several ways. So another question that we asked, 37% of our respondents also reported feeling moderately or very insecure about their financial future. And this is related to spouse under and unemployment. Among military spouse respondents who were not working but would like to be, so those who are unemployed, only 10% of those spouse respondents reported that they were financially okay with just their service member's paycheck. So all of this is telling us that military spouses need to work, and that may be impacted by their military lifestyle. In fact, 70% of our millennial respondents, which is the majority of the military, the active duty force, 70% reported that having two incomes was vitally important for their family. So it's not just because it's an expectation of work that they want to work because it keeps them busy. They need to work because it's a financial issue. So the top barrier to financial security for the respondents in our survey was spouse under and unemployment. Let me quickly define the difference between the two. Unemployment is when spouses would like to work, but are not able to. They're not able to find a job. Underemployment is when they're not employed at a level that's commensurate with their education and their experience. So we asked spouses about that in this survey. Military spouses in the survey unemployed military spouses rose from 28% to 30%. So 30% of the military spouses in our survey were unemployed. Underemployment, again, employed, but not at a level that's commensurate with their experience and education, went from 55 to 56%. So over half of the military spouses were underemployed. So I say all that to say financial issues are a big concern for military families, and you may see that as you're having military families come in. I know I think Anthony said like 44% of your client population are family members. So you may see that. Did I have that right, Anthony?
Yep, that's exactly right. Yep.
Stats are kind of my thing. So you'll notice that financial issues are a concern for active duty families, but they're also a concern for veteran families, and we'll come back to that. But I did want to focus a little bit on that separation piece for a minute. So you'll see the stressors are the top one, but family separation, as I mentioned, is another important one. So let me focus on that for a minute. As I said, 41% of our families, or the military family respondents in the survey, said that they had 6 months of family separation in the last 18. 57% also said that they had a child who had experienced separation anxiety or sleeping problems due to a parent's deployment. What we know is that military children fare better when military spouses are less stressed. This came out in the survey too. We asked about both positive and negative deployment-related behaviors or problems or outcomes connected to a deployment. We noticed that the more stressed the military spouse was, the increased number of negative child outcomes like behavior problems, like separation anxiety, like sleeping problems. Conversely, if we looked at the spouses who were less stressed, they had an increased number of positive child outcomes. They noticed their children were more resilient. They noticed they were more confident, those sort of things. So it makes sense that military children fare better when their spouses are less, or military spouses are less stressed. Now, we don't know the direction of this. It could be that increased stress that the spouses are feeling may, as associated, hang on, sorry. It may be that kids with more difficulties, like separation anxiety and sleeping problems, behavior problems, cause more stress for the military spouse who is at home, or it may be that spouses who are more stressed notice more problems. Spouses who are less stressed notice more positive things, but we do know that these two things are connected. And the Cohen Veterans Network is in a great place to intervene in this pattern because you can see family members. So as we're talking about, this to me demonstrates the importance of supporting the entire military family, in particular the children and the spouse, in addition to the family member, to the service member. So as we're talking about supporting military spouses, this is another finding that I think that will be applicable and useful for you guys. We asked specifically about feeling a sense of connectedness and a sense of belonging in their communities. Obviously, active duty families are transient and they can move from place to place, and they're frequently relocated. Military spouses did not feel a sense of belonging in their communities. More interestingly, military spouses didn't feel a sense of belonging in either their local civilian community or in their military community. So they're kind of like suspended between these worlds. They're part of the military, they're associated with the military, but they're not in the military. They're living in civilian communities, but they're not a part of those civilian communities. So they're suspended between these worlds. 48% felt that they didn't belong in the local community. 43% felt they didn't belong in the military community. And of all the different groups that we included in the survey, military spouses, service members, veterans, and veteran spouses, military spouses had the lowest sense of belonging and the lowest connection to both communities. So the best way, we actually asked respondents, how do they improve that sense of belonging? How can we help military spouses feel a sense of belonging in a community? And the respondents, service members and military spouses both said increase military spouse jobs. Increase military spouse employment will increase that sense of belonging and connectedness to the community. I want to show you also that about the relocation. military spouses, military families relocate frequently, right? This chart shows you the belonging, the sense of belonging of those military spouses if they've relocated. So this blue line shows you the sense of belonging to the military community and the amount of time it's been since they last moved. So at the beginning, if they've moved recently, they feel more sense of belonging to the military community and less to the civilian community. That makes sense. It takes 3 to 4 years of living in one place before the military spouse feels like she belongs, or I say she, but it could be she or he. Just the majority of our sample were female. It takes 3 to 4 years before that sense of belonging to that local community is greater than the sense of belonging to the military community. And I'll note that the average length of time for active duty spouses in our survey was about 2 years in one community. Most of the time they're moving every 1 to 3 years. So I say this because I feel like the Cohen Veterans Network has another opportunity to intervene here in that building that sense of belonging and building that sense of community in military families and military spouses. This is why building that sense of community is important. And this was one of the findings from the study from the survey, that surprised me. We know that military veteran suicide is a very important issue, and rightfully so. And even military service member suicide, again, also a very important issue. What we noticed in the survey this year, though, was that the rate of suicidal ideation in military spouses, was the same as the rate of suicidal ideation in service members. So it wasn't incredibly high, it's at 4%, but 4% of military spouses had considered suicide in the past year. We know that military spouse depression is higher than its civilian counterparts. 23% of our sample had reported a diagnosis of depression. Again, we asked if they had been diagnosed, so that doesn't include people who are subclinical, have subclinical levels of depression. But this is why the work that you guys do is important, because this was a quote from one of the spouses in the survey. I feel as though everyone wants to understand military service member suicide, but no one cares about the spouses who are back home while their husband is deployed, or the impact deployments have on the children. No one researches mental health of families, only the service member. Now, as a clinician, I know that that's not true. I know that there are people who are looking at military family member mental health and family member suicide, but the emphasis is on this indicates that those family members may not feel heard. So again, the work that you guys do is so important. Okay, how do we ask how we can help fix that, how we can help address that. And respondents in the survey were looking at different ways to improve healthcare and mental health. So we asked for their top improvements. First, I want to note that healthcare was a very important benefit for active duty families. It was the second most reported reason for people to stay in the military. But of course, as with all things, there are certainly places to improve. The top 3 improvements across populations were the same, but they had different priorities for different respondent groups. So everybody, all the respondents, said that their top 3 were better access to appointments, expanded coverage of services for dependents, and maintaining continuity of care. But respondents in different groups had different priorities of what they wanted to see done first, or what they wanted to see done more commonly. Service members were actually the least satisfied with their ease of access and timeliness of care and the quality of care. Their top improvement was being able to obtain an appointment when they needed one. For veterans and military and veteran spouses, their top improvement was full coverage of alternative care, and that meant things like acupuncture and chiropractic care. They wanted to make sure that that was covered, because it is covered it can be covered for service members, but not for them. And also continuity of care. You'll see is one of the second or third, and that is maintaining the same level of care even if you're relocating from installation to installation, provider to provider, or if you're transitioning from TRICARE military treatment facility to a different provider, such as the VA. So that was an important one to note. Okay, we're moving through this, so I want to pause here before we get too far and see if we had questions in the chat or questions from participants.
No questions from the chat, but if anyone wants to ask a question either now or through chat, that's great. We can.
I have a question actually.
Great.
So you talked about time away being one of the biggest stressors and concerns. That's obviously not likely to change anytime soon. So what are you sort of hearing from people about what would sort of ease that stress beyond the having a job in the area? What are some of the things that people are talking about that they would help them?
I will take a stab at that, but I also think Jen has we've had that conversation before about can we change the number of deployments? Maybe not, but one of the things that it does let us do from an organizational standpoint is provide this information to people who are making decisions about things like personnel and management and how many people do we have and do we need to making sure we have enough staffing so that we're not sending the same people on deployments over and over again. I don't know if we have a good answer of what helps everybody manage that, but we do know that building resilience for the people who are managing that time away, making sure that spouse is supported, making sure that they know about and have access to resources like feeling that sense of belonging, feeling connections in community, having access to mental health care if that's what they need. Those things are all helpful. Yeah.
I'll just add quickly. I think another area of concern for many of our families, almost 2/3, is childcare. And of course, that problem or issue is oftentimes much more of an issue when you are handling the household as a single parent, if you will. So I think that we know that all of the different services are trying different things in terms of this issue. But I think that this is one of those great opportunities where we need to see how we can be a little bit more innovative in terms of public-private partnerships and trying to expand our thinking. And we also know that this isn't just for military families. This is, a nationwide issue. Childcare is an issue for civilians as well. So maybe it's, getting everyone around the table and really having more of a conversation around that. But we do know that military families in particular are impacted during times of deployment. And I think it also blends nicely with the finding that Jessica was talking about in terms of military spouse stress during deployment. Because if you do just need, quote, quote, a break, then, and you can't find that type of hourly drop-in care or something like that, then it does make life a little bit more, a little bit trickier, I guess.
And just to add to that, I think that time away can be a problem in and of itself, but it's also one of those concerns that exacerbates everything else. So if you're stressed about having to relocate, or you have housing issues, or you can't find childcare, or there's health issues, or you have a child with special needs, having time away from family adds to all of that. So if we can help address some of those other concerns that can also reduce the stress of being away from family. It won't eliminate it, but it can reduce some of that stress. Now, I know that didn't answer your question perfectly. Do you want to ask follow-up questions or redirect?
No, that definitely helps to kind of paint the picture for sure. That's great. Thank you.
And you know, on the child care front, we're well aware of this. One of the ways we break down the barriers to care is we offer child care inside the clinic. So when you come in for your appointment, you've got that part covered. So that's one of the really nice things that we're able to offer at the Cohen Clinic.
That's
Well,
fantastic.
Wonderful. Yes, wonderful program. I wish more would do that, because we do see that what am I supposed to do when I need to go, to my doctor's appointment and I can't get care for my 3 kids. So
Yeah.
I think that is a huge issue. We do have one other comment in the chat. Are you able to see it, Jessica, or should I read it out loud?
If you want to pull it up, if you want to read it out,
Okay.
I can pull it up too.
Jonathan Riley asked, are you aware of any policy changes to help support military families? In Pennsylvania, we have a huge issue with lack of access to quality mental health services for people with TRICARE. And we did look at mental health this year, and we also asked a qualitative question surrounding mental health. So maybe, Jessica, do you want to expand on that?
Okay, yeah. We asked a qualitative question about regardless of whether or not you have obtained mental health care, what are the things that would help you if you were to obtain what are the things that would help? And the biggest thing that came out was that's the stigma against mental health care. And I know that is not new. That's been around for a long time, but finding ways to enhance confidentiality, they mentioned even making sure that the clinics and the places were someplace that no one could see you walking in and out, that they had appointments available like later in the evening, so you didn't have to take time off of your duty hours to obtain care. I do know that there is an issue of lack of access to quality mental health services for people with TRICARE. I know that's not just an issue in Pennsylvania, it's an issue across the country. Jenna's responding to the chat. It's an issue across the country, and I know that there are efforts to train more culturally competent providers, and at least in social work, and I'm sure that there are efforts in other professions as well. It's going to be a process. I don't know of any policy changes that will address that head on. I think that there are some policies that are proposed that can help indirectly, but I don't think there's a clear way to access that. Our survey also covers reserve members and their reserve and National Guard and their families. We don't get as many of them in our sample, but we do have them. So Jenna's also saying there are a couple surveys and infographics around reserve families, military one source.
I'm going to post a link. There are a couple infographics out there specifically looking at reserve families and reserve spouse well-being, I believe, and also the impact of deployment, I want to say. But I will pull those up and see if I can post the link here in the chat. Well, Jessica, we can either take more questions or continue, whichever is fine.
Well, I had one more point I wanted to make about the healthcare access. I know that and I know that Cohen is leading the way in terms of telehealth, is getting on board with that to improve accessibility for people who aren't able to make it to a clinic for an appointment. So I think that is one way to increase accessibility to quality mental health services, but that's going to be a process. It's not an immediate fix. That's one way to address it. Okay. Let me pull us back to caregivers and talk about caregivers for a minute. So 34% of our sample of our people who responded to our survey identified themselves as caregivers. And this could be people who are caring for a spouse or a partner or a child with special needs. So it was a diverse group in terms of who they were caring for. But of these 34%, 35% were caring for somebody with an emotional and mental health issue, which can complicate things because it can be an invisible injury, invisible illness, and that adds a couple layers of complexity to being a caregiver. And 12% were caring for a minor child who had special needs. And while they reported that they reported different needs according to their respondent group. So military spouse caregivers we come back to this child care issue. We know that if you're a military spouse and a caregiver, you were more likely to say that you wanted to have improved childcare access. So you need childcare so that you can take a moment for yourself or get the person that you're caregiving for to an appointment without having to take your kids along. So military spouse caregivers reported they wanted improved childcare access. If you were a veteran spouse and you were a caregiver, you were more likely to say that you wanted financial assistance. And that will tie to some of the financial issues that veteran families reported. Jen's posted that in the chat, that link to the infographic about reserve and reserve spouse well-being. Thank you, Jen. Okay. Again, probably not surprising for those of you who are working in this field, but one of the central concerns of military family or veteran families was their transition from service member to veteran. That's one of the things I really like about the military family lifestyle survey, is that we can capture both active duty and transitioning and veteran service veterans. So we can see the transition across, we can see things across that transition piece. And we can learn more about that critical period, like before, during, and after transition. When they decide to transition, like, are you going to be getting out in the next few years? If you are, what are the things that you're preparing for? Not surprisingly, 45% of the veterans felt that the biggest issue was that loss of connection to the military community. That was the key transition for veterans and veteran spouses, is they had this sense of connection, and then when they transitioned out of the military, they lost that sense of connection. Another 47% of veterans didn't feel like they had a sense of purpose when they left the military. So again, that's probably not surprising for people who work with veterans, that is a big concern, but that came up in the survey as well. Another thing that was important for you guys to note is that the majority of veterans were not prepared for their transition. 70% of veteran families had started preparing less than a year before separating, but 64% said we need more time to figure out what to do with our lives. So it's a little bit of a hurry up and wait, which is familiar for those of you in military connections, that you wait until less than a year before you get out and then go, I don't know what to do with myself now. So veteran respondents reported that they were looking for support from people who had previously transitioned, so that they could gather more realistic information about for example, what is employment like? Can I just walk out of the military on Monday and by Tuesday walk into a job that pays me the same and has the same benefits? So they need to talk to people who have been there before, so they can get more realistic information, earlier access to information, so they can begin preparing for that transition a little sooner, and so they can better prepare and manage their expectations about what transition is going to be like. Was there another question? No, Jen was posting more.
Yeah, I just posted one other resource. It expands it, and it also offers insights into different data that the DoD collects and then publishes infographics about. So
fabulous, Jen. Thank you. She's got the hookup. Yeah. She knows where all the data sources are. So now that we've shared the most important findings from both active duty and veterans, I want to briefly explain how we use that. If I can get my slide to advance. There we go. I want to briefly show how we're using that to make an impact. So the greatest effect of this survey, of the lifestyle survey, is that it helps inform and create the dialogue. Using data and using stories and voices and numbers from military families that influence the development and evolution of programs that can create change for military families. So here are some examples of, over the years, things that have changed as an impact as a result of data from our annual lifestyle survey. So in 2010, there was a presidential study directive focusing attention on military families. This helped inform and drive the Joining Forces Initiative, which you may have heard of, started in 2011. it expanded a bit or changed in 2014 with this Joining Forces Impact Pledge. And just last year we had the VA Mission Act, which also focused on creating positive change for military families, just as an overview. So there's still more that we can do, though, to increase the general public's understanding and bridge this military-civilian divide that exists. And it starts with us continuously checking in on our community and educating our community partners, such as the Cohen Veterans Network. I also should let you know that our 2019 survey will field in just a few short weeks. It's May 6th through June 14th. And I'm hoping that we can help partner and capture some of the stories of the clients that you all are seeing, so that in your local community, so that we can continue to advocate for change for them, or continue to inform the conversation.
And I just wanted to add, thank you, Jessica, that I posted the current list of chapter directors that we, it's in the chat, that we have where you are also. So what we tried to align where Cohen Veterans Network currently has sites, and then where we currently have chapters. So anyway, that's our current list, and we will be adding more in the coming years, but right now this is where we are.
So this is how you connect with us. You can connect with your local community chapter director, or you can email us or check out the survey on our website. And we are open for questions or discussion. I have to ask, did any of this surprise you, or was different than what you expected?
It didn't surprise me. One thing that I thought was interesting was and bear with me as I try to remember exactly what it was, talking about the concern for care that I think for veterans, and yeah, it was the box. It was this one.
Okay.
That it wasn't access to care, but rather full coverage of alternative care. I thought that was interesting, and how for us, just kind of, the idea of playing up the no cost to low cost aspect of our care.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that certainly helps with the obtaining appointments, and because that was also an issue for family members and for veterans and veteran spouses, is being able to obtain appointments when they needed to. If that's the thing that's keeping them from getting into care, I know that you guys are addressing that. Yeah,
absolutely. Access is one of our primary, foundational points. So we've got a commitment for, if you're in crisis, you can be seen on the same day, but we've got a great statistic about something like 94% of all clients around the country are getting that first appointment when they want it. So certainly we understand the access, as a primary function for sure.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
In the work that I do with youth villages and trying to get kids in crisis appointments, it does not always happen. I try and get a therapy appointment, and it's not for 4 more weeks. No, by that point the crisis is over. So I'm happy that you guys are doing that.
Mm-hmm. What I was going to say, by all means, share with us the links when you do put the new survey or the new call for the survey out, because we'll certainly share it on our social channels as well. And you noted the markets that you're in, so we can definitely help promote it.
Wonderful,
in those
thank
places.
you.
Yep.
Okay.
And I noticed San Diego was one of your markets, and that's one of our coming soon locations. So we'll definitely look to make those connections as we open up in that location.
Yeah, last year in our survey, we had, I think, over or close to 1,000 respondents just in San Diego alone. So as you can imagine, where we have a lot of active duty military population is typically where the survey we have our largest respondents from those areas. So the states that we have the largest representations would be California, Texas, Florida, North Carolina, Washington, D.C., Virginia area. So yes, we have quite a number there.
We did have a number from OCONUS, though. We had a number from who were all over the world, Japan and Italy and Germany. And
we tend to get around 4 to 5% of our survey respondents overall are OCONUS. So.
Interesting. And Jessica, I know you've been to a couple of our clinics. I know Clarksville and perhaps Fayetteville also, I think you had mentioned. But certainly if any of your chapter directors haven't been to our clinics, let us know. We'll make the connections to New York and DC. And then as soon as we have a building in San Diego, we'd love to have the chapter director make a visit there.
Wonderful.
All right. Does anyone else? We can open up the audio piece too if anyone else would like to ask a question or fire away in the chat as well.
Hi, this is Janet Santola. I'm in Dallas or Addison Clinic. And I am consistently, I consistently see differences in ways that people come into the military in terms of age. Marriage in the military for younger ages is more prominent than in the civilian world. So many times people will go from living at home with their parents to living in the military world where there's a lot of kind of parental oversight, and because healthcare is at no cost, all these things are there and available. If there's an appointment, and as long as there's no deployment, many times there's commander's time for the spouse to be available, and then they come out into the civilian world and all those supports evaporate. And I definitely see a difference when we have people who had life before the military or were in reserves for a while and functioning as a family, and then there was active duty on top of that. Those people tend to do better when they come out again, because they built those coping mechanisms and learned how to make the connections. So I'm wondering whether any of your research really kind of differentiates out those experiences so that we can maybe address some targets.
That's a really good question about when they entered the military. That's not a question that we've asked in the survey that I'm aware of. Maybe Jen knows. She has a little bit more history with it than I do. But we ask how long it's been since they got out. But we haven't. I can see what you're saying, that life experience really helps, because they have to do it on their own and they don't have anybody telling them how to do that. That would be an interesting thing to look at, is at what age did they enter the military, to see if that impacts their resilience or their ability to cope or their stress afterwards.
And I do think that is a worthwhile area. We don't ask any questions surrounding that currently, but I can just say from our own experience, when my husband was a commander, we frequently saw those same issues. So I do think that it's something to think about, and I think the more that we can continue the reach, and I know I've talked about this public-private partnership, but I think that is the way of the future, because some of what we're seeing in terms of issues, in my own personal opinion, is because we tend to have this sort of very sheltered community within the installation, and then it can be a bit of a jolt or a wake-up call when you have young families who are going through that transition phase and they really haven't had that experience outside of the installation gates. So I do think that's an area that we should definitely, be thinking about as we continue to do research. So thank you.
Yeah, that's a really important point, Jen, that the more we break down these barriers between military and not military, the easier that transition is going to be, because they're already somewhat overlap. If there's already somewhat overlapping or enmeshed, then that helps ease that transition. Oh, there's a question in the chat. Sorry, I was reading.
Yeah, I was just reading it too. Okay, so Jonathan asks, is there a way that our clinics can directly support the respondents to the surveys you conduct? A question at the end asking if you're interested. Also asking in which state they are looking for support in. So I don't know is the answer to that. We do have, we promise anonymity. However, we also direct them at the end of our survey that if they would like to enter into, we offer $100 gift cards to a certain number of survey participants. So I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that and check into that a little bit more. But we do have some opportunities, I believe, within Blue Star Families to participate potentially in webinars. So that might be something that we could ask you to join one of our webinars and, provide additional information about what you do to our members. And it would be, the majority of our membership, it connects with us virtually. So we do have chapters and neighborhoods, but by and large, we do interact more so in the virtual. So that may be an opportunity.
So maybe let me ask a question to you guys then. Speaking of telehealth, as we do work with we do interact with people more virtually and online. I'm sure it differs by state, but if we were to, could they access mental health care through you guys via telehealth? I don't know if anybody can.
Yeah, currently the laws it's confined within the state. So whether it's Texas or Colorado or any of the states that we are in, if that's what you're asking in terms of, it doesn't cross state borders, at least currently.
Okay.
At the current time, I can tell you that across the network, roughly 10–11% of all of our clients have had at least one session on telehealth, and that's active clients. So it is something that we've gotten some good support around, and we're looking to push that further and further in the coming year.
That's exciting. I'm glad to hear that.
Well, and I know some of the clinics, this is Leah from the clinic in Philly. I know some of us are trying, like, especially people who exist in kind of like really close tri-state areas, like we're working to get a couple of our providers licensed in Jersey, and then, Delaware would be the next target, although poor Delaware, it's always last. And I know that our sister clinic in DC can already reach, they're in Maryland, they can also service DC and Virginia. So I think potentially at the CVN level, having, a registry of who's licensed where, because we may even have people in the network who are licensed in states that we're not considering. And as long as their host organization would feel comfortable, they would have to be privileged and credentialed within the host organization to actually provide services there. And it gets complicated as we think about billing, but there are really fruitful avenues there, especially if we're trying to, help somebody who's in a pinch and doesn't have other access.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. And I'm here at Campbell. I know we're right on the border between Tennessee and Kentucky. So I see there are a lot of providers here that do similar, that they get licensed in both states so that they can serve whoever when they come in. That's very cool. If there are not other questions, we are nearing the end of our hour. So I will turn it back over to you, Anthony, unless there are any other questions or discussion that we want to have.
No, I mean, Jessica and Jen, thank you very much. This has been great. Thank you everyone for watching along and asking questions inside the chat box. As I mentioned, we'll have an archive of this inside our intranet, our clinic portal. So other members from around the network who weren't able to join today will be able to check this out as well. And we'll reach out if we have any additional questions.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for
that sounds great.
us.
Absolutely. Thank you both for your time today.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.